Welcome to Hello Kind Soul podcast, where we raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host, and I'm super excited to be with you today. If you want to follow us on all major platforms, look us up at Hello Kind Soul podcast. And if you want to follow me, look me up at E Green Equity. I hope you enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Welcome to Hello Kind Soul, folks. I'm super excited to be with you today. Today, we're really going to focus around compassionate communication. And the reason we're going to talk about it, because I think when we think about how people engage in workspaces and relationships and community with people, it is so essential for me to feel cared for in the way that people engage me, right? I think we all have this fundamental need to feel seen, heard, and valued, validated. But I think the sticking point for many people is like, how do you come to me and share critical feedback, right? What does that look like, feel like, and sound like? And based on how you come to me really dictates whether I can hear you or not, right? And so oftentimes people will speak to us and they're assuming that we're hearing what they're saying, right? Especially if they're people who feel like they're really direct, they're intentional. But if you're saying it in a way that I feel devalued, if you're saying it in a way that I feel dehumanized, can you really hear what someone's saying to you, right? And so I was chatting with someone recently about a particular situation, and she was sharing that like someone had came to her and said something like, I need to share something with you, and I'm sharing it with you because I love you, right? And her point was that while that person was saying, I want to share this feedback with you, and it's because I love you. That was their premise for the conversation, that she didn't feel love at all in the conversation, and that she felt like the person's preface to the conversation was disingenuous. Like, you're saying that you're coming to me to talk to me because you love me, but then when you talk to me, you're super condescending and devaluing and disrespectful. And so I don't really know if you're coming to me to speak to me because you care about me, and now I'm questioning your motives, right? And so we talked about it in depth, and I think, part of what I heard her saying was like, here's a person who says they care about me, but then the way that they communicated, it didn't feel good at all. And I left the conversation feeling disrespected. And so even if her information made sense, I couldn't hear any of it. And what made it so interesting is like, I know the person I was speaking to, I know. The other person I don't know. And so I don't know how the conversation was couched. And it made me think about the importance of being able to communicate with people in a compassionate way. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by it is that when the conversation is over, I get to walk away and leave with my dignity and humanity intact. I get to walk away having information that I need to process, but also walking away feeling like I was cared for and people care about me. And that's really the impetus for sharing the information. And there are so many people that I think are actually intending to deliver a message or deliver feedback or share their thoughts. But the pieces were not always good in how we say it, right? And so the first question is like, why are people that way, right? If we can remove people who don't mean you well and have this conversation from and center the fact that most people who are around you that you care about actually care about you, then we can start there and just assume good intentions, right? That this conversation they had, the one person who wanted to communicate had good intentions in speaking with the other person. Then we need to think about like, okay, so how often do we reflect on how we talk to people? How often do we really center them and not us? How often do we really rehearse what and how this could sound when I communicate it, right? And so I think that's the best place for us to start, right? It's like, okay, what's the process that you have to go through when you feel you need to tell someone something? And I think one thing for us to really think about is what type of information is it? Right. And I'm want to preface and couch this conversation. And when I want to tell you something that will that I think you can implement to make you a better person, or you could use to inform your process moving forward. Right. That's usually the way it works. Right. You hear something or you see something or you know something about someone. And because you care about them, you're like, okay, what you just did was counterintuitive to probably what you meant. And so maybe I should talk with you about it, right? But I also think that when we're going to share something with someone, sometimes it's an egregious act that someone says or does, and you're like, that's so ridiculous. You can't do that. But most often it's like seeing people do the same thing over and over and over again. And at some point it doesn't sit well with you because you care about them. And so you have to really process like, what am I going to say to really think about it? And so the first step in this process, I think for everyone, is to always think about like, why am I saying this information? Right? Like, what is the purpose of me sharing this with you? And I say that because I've said multiple times, and last season I had an episode around, the words we use, is it meant to heal or harm? And so the reason you have to start with what is the information I want to share and why am I sharing it with you? In order to answer that question, you first have to lead with, do I want to heal or harm? And that's so important because that answer then leads to the conversation of like, well, why am I sharing this? So if I want to heal, then part of the conversation is really about like, here are some thoughts or considerations that you could implement in your life that might help you have a greater impact, right? Here are some thoughts or considerations in your life that I think might help you move forward in a different way. And here are some thoughts and considerations to think about something that you might be able to implement in your life that I think on the other side will help you feel better and more impactful or more efficacious, right? If you're going to harm, then you typically don't even answer the question. Everything that comes into your mind that could be critical, you share. And sometimes that oversharing is super problematic because then you don't feel, to me, like someone who cares about me. You feel like a critic, i.e., you feel like an enemy because you're a critic, right? And so what we always have to realize, and I was just saying this before, is that I'm going to hear you through my own triggers and wounds. And so if those triggers and wounds are no one listens to me, no one values me, no one cares about me, when you bring me critical feedback, you have to understand I'm processing through whatever stuff I have in my backpack that I didn't get a chance to uncover or unpack. And in many instances, people don't even know it's there. And so when you are constantly sharing something with different people, the same people, but everything you share is overly critical or always critical, and you're never reinforcing that with starting with the positives about what people are doing, the intentions, right? I know you're well-intentioned. I know you intend to do. Then the things you're doing could potentially be causing harm. And so it makes me think about a situation I had, or several situations where I really wanted to chat and talk with a few different people who I just really care for deeply, right? And when I think about the people in my community, like most of them aren't just friends or colleagues, right? Most of them I consider to be family. So even if you are not obviously my family, if we have been in community for a long time, like those are my family members. And so sometimes I feel like I ride hard for family, right? Because you think about it, and you're like, these people are like the bomb.com. I care about them deeply. I want to make sure they succeed. I want to make sure they do good. And so when you want to share stuff with them, I feel like oftentimes it's harder than not, right? It's easier for me to talk to someone I supervise or talk to a colleague than talk to a family member because I'm more invested in how what I says impacts you. And so I always feel like I stumble over my words, even though people who know me would think I was like a wordsmith in the way that I talk. And so the second thing I would do, so the first thing I said, right, is think about why are you sharing the information? But the second part that I do is really think about what part of the information I want to share with you is attached to my emotions and what part is attached to fact, right? And so there's these moments when you feel a certain way about the things people are doing that, you think are counterintuitive to their wellness, or you're sad because you think it's not really representative of who they are. And I think sometimes there's time that you really have to decenter yourself and center them. The information I'm going to share with you is less about me and more about you, right? Because if you do it the other way, then you lead that conversation with emotion and you say something like I shared earlier, which is I'm coming from a place of love, which doesn't feel good. Like you're starting out with a condescending statement, at least in the way that I perceive it and other people perceive it. So the second thing is like, when I want to share that information, it takes me a while to really think about how do I want to say this? What do I want to say? How will it sound? And am I really, really centering them and their their well-being, or is there a part of it that I'm attached through my emotions of how I think they should be, that's going to be reflected in the conversation and could cause harm? So when you are thinking about really talking about something with someone you care about, right? And even if it's an employee, like I always think about, how do I center them in this conversation so that whatever I say is something that they can really utilize? And I'm not putting in, well, my thought is you need to, or, what you're doing makes me feel like. It's really not about you, right? And the more and more you're in spaces, the more and more you engage in business and building initiatives and et cetera, you start to realize it's not emotional. And I'm not saying I don't have strong emotions about decisions that are made or strong emotions about the way we should proceed, but I'm not talking in a way that is overly emotional, because I need to be in control of my own emotions and I need to be regulated to have a conversation that could potentially be challenging, right? And so that leads me to the third piece is like, okay, and how much do you value this relationship? Because how much I value this relationship really comes down to the effort and length I will go to preserve the relationship and really couch the conversation in love, right? I'm not saying to someone, I'm saying this because I love you. I feel like you need to make sure that when you have this conversation, it's through the lens and frame of love. And so it comes down to like, how much do I value the relationship? How badly do I want to ensure that I keep this relationship in my life, right? Because I think if we can center them and the importance of them in your life and you in their life, then that conversation has to be grounded in a space of love, because you matter to me. And so how I say it and what I say, I need to be very intentional about how I engage people, right? It's not this happenstance of me just kind of shooting off with the mouth. It's really taking time to think about, why do I want to say this? Is it because I'm offended or I'm mad or I'm upset? Is it me centering me and my emotions, or me centering them and their emotions? And how aware am I of what they want to do in the world? And is this information crucial and attached to what it is I want them to do in the world or they want to do in the world? Is it attached to who they say they want to be or how they're choosing to live their life to be a better person, right? Like, all of these things are questions that are important, right? And that idea of like how important the relationship is also attached for me to how much do they mean to me, right? Because there are sometimes you'll see people do stuff, or you'll see different missteps people might take or make, and you're like, well, I don't, like, I'm not really that invested. Like, you're someone I know, but I don't have a deep relationship with you. And so if I say this to you, this might be misconstrued or taken personal. And I just don't really want to go that length to like have this conversation, right? And then the other piece of that is that we all have people in our community who we love deeply who don't like to self-reflect. And it doesn't matter what you say to them, they're never going to hear you, right? Or they're just going to be defensive and basically it's everyone else, it's not me. Right. I have no ownership. I have no part to play in this. Right. And as I've shared before, that there's a moment in everyone's life, in multiple moments, I think, actually, where you realize, like, I keep ending up in the same place and the only common denominator in that place is me. So how could it be everyone else? But if you're not willing or able to really listen through that, right, the lens of that wounded child saying there's something wrong with you, you're always wrong, then sometimes it's really, really difficult to hear someone communicate things to you that requires you to take some level of accountability to yourself, right? Because here's the thing, folks, if I tell you something or someone comes and tells me something and I don't want to listen to it, I could just disregard it. But if I value the person who's bringing me the information, if I value the relationship, the relationship I have with the person, and that person is communicating with me through being grounded in love, then by the time that conversation is over, I'm going to be a little salty, 100%, because I don't want to hear critical feedback either. Like, it's not that I don't want to hear it. It's just sometimes hard to hear, especially with people who love me. Like, if I know someone loves me and they come tell me something that I've done or I've said or the way of being that I showed up, like, the worst part to me is disappointing people you care about. And so when people share that with you of how you might have made someone feel or something you may have done, it never feels good to take accountability and ownership of it. It doesn't. But I will tell you the beautiful piece is as you start to process and really work through it and be able to own the things that belong to you and let go of the stuff that kind of doesn't, every single day you get better as a human being because you're now reflecting in real time. And you get to this place where you realize, like, anyone who loves me, their goal is not to destroy me. So if they're sharing something with me, the least I can do is consider what they're saying to me, as opposed to automatically deflect or deny or push it away or whatever. And then there's also people that when you talk to them, they're going to give you 1,000 excuses why. But those same people, when you leave the conversation, are actually still going to take time to think about it. And sometimes you're not going to get, someone's not going to say to you, oh, Eb, you're so right. Thanks for sharing. Oh my gosh, I'm going to work on it. It might sound like, no, you know what? That really wasn't me, or it was a bad time, or, I didn't mean it, but, I appreciate that. And then the next time you engage with them or you see them doing whatever, the way they approach it is different. And so in the heart of hearts, like, I delivered this through love for you because I care about you winning. I'm clapping for you. I want to see you get there to achieve whatever goal you want. And I can see through your actions, you processed what I said and you took whatever you needed to take from that conversation to improve the way that you move forward. And that's dope. That's what it's all about, right? It's not getting people to be like, oh, you're 100% like all the affirmative the talk after the conversation is really irrelevant, right? Because you didn't come out to have the conversation for someone to affirm you are right. You had the conversation because you care about people deeply and you want to see everyone win. And so if you want to see everyone win, if there's people in your community or in your circle that can benefit from what you see or benefit from your feedback, then your goal should be to serve your community the same as they serve you, right? And it's reciprocal, folks, right? So if you're the person who only gives feedback to everyone else, but when they bring it to you, you lose your mind or tell people, oh, you're doing this, you need to look at yourself too, right? Earlier today, I had a conversation about something I had said 2 days ago, 3 days ago, and it kept gnawing at me. And I was like, oh man, why don't I feel good about this thought, right? And it wasn't even something I said in, public. It was just something I was thinking about and chatting with someone about. And then when I kind of woke up this morning, it was like, oh, you know what? Like what I thought they said, they didn't actually say. But I thought they said it because I perceived it from what they said, but that wasn't what they didn't say anything near what I thought they said. And I had to think about like, okay, the text, I went back and read the text. Okay, here's what they said. And here's what you said they said, but what you said they said, they didn't actually say. And so what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I had to take my own medicine and really reflect on this person means you well. You've always seen them in a light of like a good, solid person who actually always adds value to the people around them. So why would they randomly send you a text that's meant to harm you? That makes no sense. You need to go back and run the tape again. And so then I went back and looked and was like, oh, okay. I might have said something that they didn't say. And that was because of my perception and the different triggers that I have. And so while there are moments where you're like, oh, I feel really good, just know the little child that's unhealed is always in your body. They don't leave your body. They're just there hanging out. And as you heal it, they get fed and they feel better. But every once in a while, they're like, hey, yep, I'm still here, right? So when you're communicating with someone, it's also to think about, is this what they're saying or is this what I'm saying? Is this what they meant or is this what I think they meant, right? Because our perception will always be our reality, even if our perception is off. The other thing that I think is important is that when you have the conversation, your goal needs to be that I want you to leave this conversation, even if it's tough, feeling loved and cared for. I want you to know that I'm bringing this to your attention because I actually care about you and I care about what you're trying to do in the world. And so this piece of information that I'm bringing is crucial. I think it's crucial for your advancement. Now, I also have said to many people when I talk to them, you could take some of this advice, none of this advice, all of this advice. I'm sharing it because I want to see you win. And I know your potential. I see your potential. I know you. So I know whatever you're here to do is going to be epic because you're already doing some of it. I just want to give you some information that you can consider that may help you take it to the next level. Because what I'm saying is not the absolute truth, right? These are some considerations or some thoughts or some feedback I might have received or I may have that I'm going to share with you, but there's no obligation that anyone has to take anything you say and implement it in their life. Because we're all a work in progress, every single one of us. So none of us are absolutely the right or true person, right? with all the information. That doesn't occur. And then the final piece I think that we really should consider is like, and I started with this, like, how do I make sure this person leaves with their dignity and their humanity intact, right? And I've seen conversations, I've had critical conversations with people, particularly in the last month or two, that's really started out with like, hey, I think you're super talented, right? And I think there are so many things you're trying to accomplish. And I really appreciate you doing X. And I see how you're trying to leverage Y. Here are some things that I think might be helpful on your journey, right? Like, and I always make sure people understand, like, I'm a work in progress. So there's no expectation that any of this is something you will implement, but I just see how amazing you are. And I think this might be something that you could, kind of sit, process, chew on, and if you want, take it and use it. But I totally know that you're here to do something great. And so I would feel remiss if I don't share my thoughts based on whatever, right? And for me, when I think about the idea that someone goes out of their way to text or communicate or come see me or sit with me or meet me at a coffee shop or whatever, to share with me some things they think about me that they think could make them better, like, I'm like, this is dope. Like, when we move ego out of it, the fact that anyone goes out of their way to share something with you about you that potentially makes you better, bruh, like, people don't do that. A lot of people could care less if you crash out. So the other piece is to hear with a learning ear and understand that anyone who goes out of their way to bring you information that they're not obligated or have to give you, that they think might make your life better, the least we could do is hear them out and have a conversation. Because that person sees you and cares for you and values you and knows what your potential could be. And so they're going out of their way to inform your process so that you can be out in the world changing it real time. But making sure when you have conversations with people, being gentle and caring and loving, and it's this give and take between, here's who I know you to be, here's who I see how you are, here's what I see you doing, and here's something you potentially could add in that could make what you're doing and who you are even better. Because I know that you have the ability to change the world, right? So I'm bringing all this to you because I just feel like we get lost a lot. And what happens is people are so quick to want to share the information or give the feedback. Sometimes that's why I say kind of sit and think about, is this through a space of love? Like, I want you to know no matter what, I love you, even when I'm upset, even if I'm disappointed. And I didn't always have that lens, right? Like, there were many times where I faltered in how I presented information, how I spoke with people, how I gave critical feedback, because I didn't have the ego in check. I didn't really know it was for them and not me. It wasn't my job to really judge them. Giving little subs to people, So I think all of us are a work in progress, which is why this podcast even exists. And I hope this helps someone out there. Like, when we are talking to people and in community and communicating, we just have to be mindful that everybody has a right to have their dignity, right? When they walk away, they should still have their humanness about them, right? They should know that even if you've made a mistake or this job isn't for you or this role isn't for you or this partner isn't for you, it doesn't mean that something else isn't. It just could be that your strengths are this and you're that. So if your strengths are this and you're in this and that, maybe they're misaligned. And so maybe there's some decision making that has to happen, right? If the way you're communicating with other people is potentially causing harm or dehumanizing them, like, hey, why don't we think about how we're talking with people? Because yes, there is a space of accountability and being in the role as a leader, and there is a way to still hold people accountable and be really respectful in who they are and who they're becoming, right? Maybe someone isn't really prepared for the job they're in and their skill set is low. So do you value them enough to build that skill set, or do you not build the skill set and then devalue them? All of those things are conversations on offer, particularly when we're communicating. And so this idea of compassionate communication is so crucial and key, because that requires us to sit still, process, center someone else, couch our whole conversation in love, because I see you and I value you and I care about you. Think about, how much does this relationship mean to me? How much does this person mean to me? And when they leave this conversation, will they feel valued, cared for, seen, and heard? I hope this was helpful, folks. I hope you're having an amazing day. I hope you ask yourself some of these questions when you have conversations with people. Is this the process you go through to make sure that in your engagement with them is compassionate? Because all of us have a job to do here, folks. And it's the journey back to our kindest soul. And part of it is to be reflective of who we are, where we've been, and who we're becoming. Have an amazing day, kind soul, and I'll see you next week. Take care.